The opening scene shows Adelphi Street. Chloe and Vivian are breathing heavily as they face each other, rage displayed on their faces. Each of them holds a piece of kitchen equipment in their hands, ready to launch at each other. The cousins have been inseparable ever since the passing of their parents, until recently. What could have happened? 2 weeks earlier, Vivian arrived at Isabel's pastry store on her bicycle. On her way in, she greets the old Mrs. Lopez, one of their frequent customers, and heads straight for the kitchen. Her Aunt Isabel asks her to smell the aroma coming from the cannoli she just prepared. Vivian asks about other preparations that are supposed to be made for the party, so she will know how best to assist her aunt. She comes back and slides a beaded bracelet on Isabel's hands, while informing her that she sold the entire collection. Both of them are excited, because this means Vivian now has the money to go to Europe. She offers to stay back until the business stabilizes, but Isabel insists she book her ticket already. With a beautiful smile on her face, Isabel stares at the young lady, who has worked so hard that her efforts are finally paying off. On the other end of town, Chloe arrives at work a bit late. She sneaks into the kitchen where she works. Fernando Mendilibar, who is the host for the TV show Happy in the Kitchen, wraps up a broadcast. He immediately starts complaining about his script that got changed. He walks over to Chloe, demanding to know why he had to talk about salmon in a bed of vegetables when he prefers salads. She subtly disses him as she educates him about the essence of the meal he just advertised. Fernando makes a threat, emphasizing how he is the star of the show, and without him, she won't have a job. This is also a great way to remind someone you are the bane of their existence. Chloe turns away with a triumphant smile on her face. She sees the head of the kitchen, Mao, and quickly pleads with him to replace her for that night's shift since she needs to be present at her uncle's retirement party. Mao smiles at her and blatantly declines her request. Instead, he drops a spoon in her open palm and walks away. In the next scene, the Isabella pastry shop is flooding with customers. After having a taste of one of the pastries, Isabel begins to choke. She steps outside coughing, albeit weakly. Thankfully, Vivian comes back from her errand just in time to find her aunt collapsing. Isabel bids Vivian goodbye and requests for her to take care of the only precious thing they have. Vivian looks distraught as her aunt closes her eyes and breathes her last breath, right in her arms. While going about her duties, Chloe receives a phone call that changes her countenance. She shoves her apron on Fernando, who is complaining about a dish in his usual routine. Before he gets the opportunity to say another word, Chloe walks out. For her, there are more pressing matters than listening to a whining adult. Just like the rest of the family, Dave, Isabel's brother, Vivian, Chloe, and Ian, whom they are all familiar with, arrive at Isabel's funeral. She believes that her aunt got murdered by the sweets she dedicated her life to making because the old lady's glucose level was already high, yet she kept eating sweets. The attendees at the funeral soon start making noise and merriment, instead of mourning in silence. Vivian excuses herself to go grab a drink. She walks down the street and stops by a cafe not too far off. A stranger notices her from when she enters the cafe and seems intrigued by her order. The young man by the name of Paul Russell starts up a conversation with her by offering to trade his extra sugar for her ham if she is willing. He also reminds her that too much sugar isn't good for her health. His words make her laugh. Vivian discovers that he works with a bank, where he helps people recover from loans. They spend most of the evening chatting, and she seems to be entertained based on her occasional laughter. A few days later, Chloe and Vivian visit their aunt's lawyer, who informs them that according to Isabel's will, she did leave them an equal share in the bakery. However, she also left behind a fortune in debt. The icing on the cake. He further explains that she was a bad administrator and continued to borrow from the bank, despite the many times he tried to warn her. He reveals that the bank has already seized the apartment she left to Dave, and they might be coming for the pastry store as well. The lawyer advises them to get the business up and running, because the bank might just take over it if they find out that it's closed. Chloe and Vivian are in a state of confusion, as they don't even know what to expect again. Could things get any worse? After she leaves the lawyer's place, Vivian calls Paul while she cycles on the road. She seeks his professional advice as she breaks down the situation regarding her late aunt's debt. She mentions the possibility of them losing the properties she left behind. Paul is a bit busy, trying to find his way around so he can meet up with a client. He gives her a rundown on how to go over the situation and requests they talk later. It turns out both of them are heading in the same direction as they arrive at Isabel's pastry store a few minutes after the call. Chloe comes out almost immediately to find both of them by the entrance. Paul introduces himself and states that he works for the United East Coast Bank, also mentioning how Isabel's business has been supported by the bank since it opened. Dave joins them and Vivian interrupts Paul, who is explaining how her aunt borrowed exacerbated amounts to fund her business, against the bank's advice. Chloe informs him that Dave now lives in the bakery because the house has been taken away by the bank. She quotes him and reminds him that he just told her that they can plead to have an extension of 3 months if they can show that they have nowhere else to live. Paul reveals that Isabel owes the bank $230,000. However, he's willing to oblige them with a grace period of 3 months if Vivian will go to dinner with him. Is this trade deal even ethical? Later on, Chloe and Vivian are going through their aunt's stuff, hoping to find something tangible that will help them raise some money. Vivian admits that she can't go to dinner with Paul. During the conversation, Chloe informs her that she is free to travel to Europe like she always wanted, while she'll put her ideas to work to see if she can turn the bakery into something a bit more modern. Chloe intends to fight, even if it's just for 3 months. They get interrupted by a guy who sells pastries. He's there to advertise his products to them, but Chloe shoos him away, informing him that nothing is going to change because they will continue making their pastries themselves. After he leaves, Vivian reveals that she plans to continue with her trip to Europe. The following morning, Vivian packs up her bag ready to leave for Europe, while Chloe, who is beginning to get irritated with Fernando's behavior, informs him that she will be leaving his kitchen. She bids him goodbye and asks him to watch her leave, if he thinks he is the only one who can make her quit, just because he hired her. She makes sure to remind him that he will be on his own, without her around to help him. Who could have seen this coming? She soon arrives at Isabella's pastry shop, with a hope and a smile on her face, not knowing something shocking awaits her. As she walks inside, guess who she sees? Vivian in an apron holding a plate of freshly baked pastries. She walks over, questioning why Vivian is not on her trip to Europe. Chloe isn't too pleased. Their conversation gets interrupted by a woman who is there to purchase a croquembouche. She soon takes her leave after hearing that they do not have croquembouche, and she's not willing to settle for anything else. Vivian suggests that Chloe should start making and selling what the woman wants. Later that evening, a customer walks into the store, requesting to purchase half a croissant. Chloe finds the order quite weird. However, she cuts a croissant into 2 and gives him half, since Vivian asks her to be nice. For some reason, Chloe decides to annoy Vivian, who is attending to a customer, and in no time, the girls get into a fight using any ingredient they lay their hands on to attack each other. The beginning of sibling rivalry. Ian's friend, Dimitri, comes back to get a pack of pills he left in the bathroom, but the fight currently going on prevents him from entering the bakery. Dave quietly walks away, leaving the ladies to attack each other without restraint, until Paul walks in. He clears his throat to make his presence known and informs them that he brought with him the paperwork to grant their extension, so he needs a signature. They untangle themselves, and in a few minutes, Vivian is explaining to Paul how she found herself in a fight with Chloe, who suddenly went berserk. At the cafe where they are sitting, the waiter takes their order, making fun of Vivian's scattered hair and unkempt look. Vivian reveals that she and Chloe became orphans on the same day after their parents passed away, in the same accident. So, they've had a tough life. She pauses, asking why she's explaining her life's challenges to him when he is the enemy here. Paul assures her that he's there to help her with the bank's policies, and he'd also like to complete the missing links in creating a relationship with her. The waiter drops the maple syrup on the table noisily, and Paul picks it up. In an attempt to make Vivian feel comfortable, he bathes himself with the maple syrup. In the next scene, Ian is struggling with a basket that had been stuck to his feet since Mrs. Audie came to buy some croquembouche. He calls for help, wishing a lady will come to his rescue. Daniela taps his shoulder lightly as he catches her attention while she is heading to check on Chloe at the pastry store. She gives him a hand with the basket, but Ian is so engrossed in her beauty that he begins to nervously talk too much. Oh, the power of beauty. Chloe feels delighted to see her colleague Daniela at the store, and she confesses that she needs Daniela's brilliant ideas. The following morning, Dimitri arrives to threaten Ian if he doesn't return his pills to him. Vivian cycles her way down to the store only to find out that Chloe has decided to split it in 2 because their aunt willed 50% of the shop to each of them. Chloe explains that she doesn't want to feel as though a limit is placed on her. Also, since she also has rights to the store, she had come up with an idea to take her share. Vivian lacks the words to respond to her cousin. In the heat of the moment, she informs Ian that he's hired and walks into the kitchen. Both of them start baking different pastries. Vivian makes some half croissants and a few other pastries she knows their customers love. They are done making the necessary preparations, and the duo move over to the sales stand, awaiting the entrance of a customer. It's about to go down. Professor Zubal arrives to purchase some pastries. He unknowingly steps into Chloe's side of the bakery, and without wasting time, Chloe packs up some scones which she offers to him to try. He thanks her, but he prefers the pastries Vivian has already packed up for him, because she already knows his regular order. The smug smile of victory graces Vivian's lips. She outrightly shows Chloe that she knows the customers better, and then she goes back to the stand, enjoying her first win. Meanwhile, Daniela leaves the bakery and goes through the train station. She continually senses that someone is following her. She turns occasionally but finds no one there, so she continues walking until she gets to Mr. and Mrs. Stove's apartment. Ian follows her into the house, sneaking behind her until he accidentally reveals his presence. What's love if you can stalk your crush? He pretends it's all a coincidence. Mr. and Mrs. Stove come in and welcome Daniela, who thanks them for letting her renovate their house. Daniela wonders why Mr. Stove is making a special request not to touch the floors which look really old, but since customers are always right, she lets out a dry smile and nods her head in response. Done with her business in the Stove's home, Daniela steps out, but Ian wouldn't stop following her around. She asks him why he's moving around with her, as if they are on a date when she only helped him with his foot, which got stuck in a basket. He thinks she approves of his actions, and continues walking with her despite seeing she's not so pleased with him. At the bakery, Chloe gets the attention of the next customers to walk in. She advises Vivian to take a walk outside until she realizes that people are looking for new ideas instead of the outdated pastry style she's stuck to. Paul, who walks in a few minutes earlier, agrees with Chloe, but Vivian shuts him up, reminding him that she's the enemy now. Ian comes back to the bakery, and Paul requests for Vivian to take a stroll around town with him. A customer named Mrs. Laporte walks in minutes after Vivian steps out, and makes a request for a particular type of resin. Unfortunately, Dave is having a hard time knowing where the new items are after the girls turn the place upside down and divide the store amongst themselves. Meanwhile, Ian calls the attention of the customer who walks away from Chloe's stand, where Dave is standing. Dimitri, who has been waiting for a perfect opportunity to retrieve his stuff, hears Dave lament about working in the bakery with Chloe when all he knows about is grass. He confirms Dave's statement and reveals that he might just be the person he is looking for. During her walk with Paul, Vivian admits that Chloe might be right because her clients are old, while the young ones around are like Martians. Paul assures her everything will be fine if she looks at her dreams and follows that which interests her the most. They soon argue their way back to the boulangerie, and there, they find Chloe lashing out at Fernando for refusing to admit that his success is a result of her ideas. Dave informs Vivian that he wants to move out, but she refuses. She wonders what's going on with Chloe and the strange guy, until Fernando grabs Chloe, kissing her ferociously. Who could have seen this coming? She takes her leave, and her uncles Dave and Paul do the same. Later that evening, Paul takes a pair of shoes he took from the boulangerie and takes it to a blind man named Nathan, who can tell a lot about a person just by touching and feeling the energy from an object. At the boulangerie, Chloe rubs several ingredients on Fernando's body to spike his dopamine before they make out. She remembers one more thing and excuses herself to go get it from the kitchen, but then she stumbles upon Vivian struggling with the dough. Chloe wants to ignore her, but upon giving it another thought, she turns around to show her how it's done, a process where the dough doesn't lose its flavor. Vivian wonders why she's helping her, but after listening to her cousin, she's more curious to know why Chloe doesn't want to help her keep her promise to Isabella, instead of being a competitor. Chloe reveals that Vivian chose to make the wrong decision in her life, which happened to also affect hers. The following morning, Dave and Dimitri are taking a walk together. They talk about Dave's time when he was selling grass at the stadium and how much he misses having the opportunity to read, now that his sight has gone bad. At Ian's apartment, he thinks back on what Danielle said about her culture, regarding the set of men that are considered conquistadors for conquering women. He looks up some Spanish men on the internet and thinks about trying to change his looks to fit what he saw. We'll see how this turns out. Paul stops by the bakery, and while Vivian is working on some pastries, he dips his hand in the Nutella and licks it, hoping it'll have an effect on Vivian, because that is what he was told by Nathan the other night. Vivian reveals that it doesn't do anything to her, so he asks about the shoe and finds out that it belongs to Aunt Isabel. He's somewhat disappointed. He wishes her luck with her competition and suggests she wears her aunt's shoes for inspiration. Fernando meets Chloe and makes her an offer to come back with him if he helps her sell more. She declines and reminds him that the original deal is for her to help him find more recipes. They agree on the deal, and she passes him a cookbook for him to check out. Ian continues stalking Daniela. He follows her, requesting that she stop working for the Stoves. He reveals that he needs her to explain the story of the conqueror because he couldn't find anything other than Genghis Khan and Adolf Hitler after doing a Google search. Daniela stops a cab and tells him to just do the opposite of what he always does. At work, Paul enters his boss's office and suggests to Mr. Herman that they can find a way to work around Isabelle's debt so they don't end up evicting the residents at the boulangerie. Mr. Herman sternly informs him to do whatever he can to send them out because he wants the place on the market at the end of the month. Compassion is not in the bank's dictionary. As agreed, Fernando brings his TV show to the boulangerie to create some publicity and promote sales for Isabella's pastries. Meanwhile, Paul comes in to update Vivian about the latest development with his bank, but he gets carried away, seeing an opportunity to take her shoe. He bends down and uses his hand to search for the shoe while inviting her to dinner later in the day. After succeeding, he heads to the man's stand, requesting to know 3 things about her personality. He wants to use this information to get Vivian to like him. Dimitri meets Ian, who is searching for Daniela at the bakery. He informs Ian that he doesn't need the pills anymore and thanks him for being of immense help to him ever since he arrived in the country. Dimitri goes back to meet Dave by the waterside. He excitedly takes out Dave's favorite book and reads it to him, even though it is difficult for him to read in English because the original version is in Russian. At 6:30 p.m., Paul picks Vivian up for their date, and she adds the finishing touches to his looks with a scarf. He also loosens his suit so he'll look perfect for their date. At the boulangerie, Fernando meets the only woman in the world who keeps rejecting him over and over again. He gives her the flowers he bought and requests to take her to dinner at a weird restaurant that he already booked. Chloe replies to him with a wild and angry look on her face. She's pissed off that he only used her for his TV show and did not mention the address of her restaurant. Realizing that she's right, he pleads to make it up to her by buying dinner, and he promises to roll out the address during the next show. Ian visits the Stove's home in search of Daniela. He finds her by the fireplace crying because it is the same type her grandmother had back in Chile. It reminds her of home, which she misses so much. However, she knows this sadness is the price she has to pay to live the dream. He listens to her attentively and wonders why she's not going back. She reveals she wants to surprise the Stoves by doing a makeover of their original floor, which must mean a lot to them. She accepts Ian's request to assist her with the whole preparation. Still, on her date, Vivian is excited that Paul has chosen her childhood favorite place, even without knowing her. They order lobsters and continue walking. Vivian talks about her dream, where a stranger will be holding her hand, walking down the park while they eat lobsters, and a band of mariachis will pop out in the middle of the park. Paul signals the band to move closer. Once in view, he suggests it must be a coincidence for them to be right in the middle of her dream. He realizes she's not impressed by the band, so he quickly dismisses them, and they continue their stroll. Chloe and Fernando step out of the restaurant after their date. She suddenly remembers the flower that she left inside. Unfortunately, the door doesn't open, but as they are talking, Fernando snaps his fingers and 5 mariachis show up behind him and start playing. She jumps on him, kissing him joyfully, because it's the most romantic thing any man has ever done for her. Who knew he could be romantic too? At the park, Vivian and Paul find a seat and continue discussing Paul's dreams, talking about how he wrote a manuscript, which he ended up discarding. Vivian is thrilled to hear that he traveled to Europe and even wrote a book there. She kisses him and reveals that she needs to work harder so she can keep her promise to her aunt, and then she will be free to fulfill her dream of traveling to Europe. Ian and Daniela begin cutting the carpet, and she's disappointed to see a different flooring from what she expects. She gets up, regretting that she didn't just do as she was told to, while Daniela moves away, hoping the boys will return soon with the carpet to replace the one she cut. Ian quickly takes a photo of the floor and searches the internet for a solution. He takes one of the pills and gulps it down with a glass of wine. His confidence shoots up and he walks up to Daniela. With a thick masculine voice, he speaks Spanish to her seductively, leaving Daniela surprised. He suggests they'll have an opportunity if they remove the linoleum and find the real floor. Paul finally breaks the truth to Vivian, who isn't taking it lightly. They get back to the boulangerie, and her voice calls the attention of Chloe and Fernando, who are in the kitchen. Paul explains that the bank has taken advantage of the law, which prohibits living in a place open to the public. This means they will be evicted on Monday. Despite trying his best for their sake, Vivian still blames him as the cause. She angrily walks in, leaving him. Paul attempts to go after her, but Chloe intercepts him and orders him to leave already. Fernando thinks it's an opportunity, but Chloe gets really annoyed and pushes him out of the bakery. At the Stove's house, Daniela realizes that Ian is right about the original floor, which is indeed beautiful. Ian quotes Neruda, and to her, it sounds as though Bill Gates is singing Julio Iglesias. Daniela hears the Stoves coming. and she suddenly becomes anxious, thinking of an excuse as to why they had to remove the carpet without their permission. To make matters worse, Ian shows her a pipe that he removed from a decaying corpse, which was buried in a section of the floor. Daniela's heart skips a beat, and just then, Mr. and Mrs. Stove walk right in. Mr. Stove insists that they take a seat, while his wife prepares them some tea. In a bid to show them how serious he is, the old man draws his sword from what's supposed to be a walking stick. No one could have seen this coming. Meanwhile, Chloe and Vivian share an old wine in the cellar. They lament over the store, which the bank will soon take over. Chloe reveals that they at least had fun, because she had always wanted to smash a cake on Vivian's face, for always wearing her apron. For the first time, Vivian pays close attention and realizes that the apron she's wearing belongs to Chloe. She also realizes that Isabella might have been referring to Chloe as the precious thing that she should save. She grabs Chloe, hugging and apologizing to her, a wholesome sight to behold. Vivian informs her cousin that they can still save the place, since she knows all the customers, and Chloe is the best baker in the whole of Brooklyn. They agree to Vivian's suggestion and move to call Ian so he can join them in knocking the bank off. A few moments later, Mr. Stove forces Daniela to have a drink from the tea his wife prepared. Ian refuses to let her drink it, so he gulps it down, and when Mrs. Stove reveals she had put arsenic inside the tea, he instantly starts dazzling them with many speeches while picking up their jackets. The old couple smiles to themselves as they watch him babble until he and Daniela step out before they can finish their countdown. Outside, Ian drops flat on the floor, and Daniela shouts for help while they are in the middle of the road. Thankfully, an ambulance passes by and gives them a ride to the hospital. At the office, Mr. Herman is having a nice time with two ladies. He spots Paul in the office and questions what he's doing there on a Sunday. After listening to him, he gives Paul a few words of encouragement. With Monday just a few hours away, everyone is tense, even though they are in various locations. Fernando can barely concentrate on his cooking show, and Vivian is quite restless. Fortunately, Ian finally regains consciousness the next day, and the first person he asks to see is Daniela. Dave, Chloe, and Vivian visit him at the hospital. Vivian informs him that she had to discharge Daniela, who has been with him almost all through the day. She also reveals that he took another substance before swallowing the arsenic, and luckily, it neutralized the arsenic, which is why he is still alive. Dimitri walks in, apologizing for experimenting with the pills, but Ian doesn't let him finish. He embraces him, showing appreciation. He confesses love for Dimitri, and promises to wave off whatever issues they had before now. Chloe interrupts them to inform him that they have to leave now if they want to save the business. Upon getting back to the boulangerie, the ladies see that it has been locked with huge chains, a heartbreaking sight to behold. Lenny passes by and offers them a hand in removing the chains. Soon, the ladies gain entrance into the store. They take off the demarcation between Chloe and Vivian's section. Then they instantly start baking lots of different pastries. After a night of baking and decorating, Ian, Dave, and Dimitri return to the bakery to give the ladies a helping hand in rescuing the business. Vivian brings a tray containing pastries and requests for them to go around the neighborhood and get the neighbors, so there will be a full house when the bank arrives. Hours later, the boulangerie is filled to the brim with several people flocking in and out. Some even hang around outside the bakery. Fernando arrives to assist Chloe, and he also apologizes for his behavior. Herman and his crew charge towards the bakery, but the moats block the bakery's entrance, refusing to let go. Herman urges them to keep calm and watch quietly. He hands them a plaque, declaring the bakery a historic landmark, a place where May Capone used to buy her cannoli in the year 1919 to 1926. The girls are surprised to know about such information, and the press takes over the conversation, interviewing them and getting their reaction to the news. The bakery is now recognized as a historic landmark and will no longer be forced to close. Herman gives them the papers to sign and congratulates them. He tells Vivian not to thank him, but his least convincing ex-employee, who managed to persuade the Commission on National Heritage. Vivian realizes that it must be Paul, so she smiles at him and offers him some cannoli. The next day, Vivian packs her bags ready to leave for Europe. Chloe intercepts him and picking up her calls or returning her texts, so she goes over to the bakery to bid everyone goodbye. Chloe bids her farewell and jokingly tells her not to return because she'll be exactly where she wants to be, doing what she does best. They exchange embraces with Dave and Ian. Afterward, Chloe watches her take leave. Ian finally summons the courage to confess his affection for Daniela. With Dave's help, he takes her to the stadium to show her who he is, instead of the conquistador he has been trying to become. The screen displays the sunrise in Torres del Paine. It reminds Daniela of her home, and it's the nicest thing anyone has done for her, aside from risking his life in front of two murderers. She instantly turns and gives him a kiss, and she continues to enjoy the scenery on screen. Paul attempts to go from the seats. Dimitri and Dave are watching the lovebirds in the middle of the field. Dimitri gives one of his pills to Dave, who suddenly starts understanding the Russian language after swallowing it. He feels even more excited when Dave speaks his native language. Vivian finally arrives in Valencia after touring a few European cities, but Chloe finds her and admits to being a coward for not being courageous enough to face her. The story comes to an end as the duo reconciles. Vivian thanks him for rescuing her when she was in distress, even though he ran away before she could even thank him. She reaches for his lips and plants a kiss on them. Paul responds by wrapping his arms around her and matching her kiss's intensity.